Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insights and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Joe Kerins. Joe, how you making out this morning?
I am good. I'm excited for today.
Yeah, this is going to be we're going to get deep today.
Yep.
On a subject matter that is near and dear to the college planning heart. You can love them, you can hate them, but they are misunderstood across the board.
Absolutely.
Today we're talking about the Section 529 plans, and commonly known as 529 college savings plans. Let's start with the basics, Joe.
All right.
The idea behind the 529 is that you can use post-tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
You can save, invest, and the gains on the 529s, if used for quote unquote college education expenses, higher education expenses, they say, the gains are tax free.
Yeah.
That's it.
Pretty basic. And I'll be upfront right now. We're not going to be able to cover everything that goes into 529s in an hour.
Nope. And we will also not be making financial recommendations.
Correct.
We will simply be talking about the rules and what they are and what they are actually good for, what they're bad for, the pros, the cons. It's not to say 529s are bad. It's not to say that they're good or they're the best thing. It's just the fact that they are misunderstood by individuals, by financial advisors, by custodians. They are just misunderstood.
Absolutely.
And the bigger impact, I think, Joe, is that it's not that the investment strategies and that are misunderstood. It's how they actually play out and are utilized and how they affect the cost of college, right?
Yep.
That's the big thing.
Yep.
So we've done some digging in.
Yeah.
I have on my screen the Legal Information Institute, U.S. Code Title 26, Subtitle A, Chapter 1, Subchapter F, Part 8. Subsection 529, if you want to get into where you find this information.
Yeah. I walked into your office this morning and went, oh God, how deep did you get into this? I basically just wanted to find, a couple articles and did a quick Google search and said, I think I typed in, are 529s good or bad? And the first article that came up, I thought was a good piece to kind of start the conversation with, which was debunking the myths of 529 college savings plan. And it was on an article that was written May of 2021. So there's some things that are outdated that we'll kind of talk about, but written by Michelle Fox, and just some interesting things. And it was funny because the first line of the article is, even though they've been around for decades, 529 college savings plans are still often misunderstood. And and even this article doesn't get into the actual pieces of what we're going to get into today. It is ultimately what I want to get, where I'm sure that we'll head to. But as you said, Dave, it is very basic. It's you put after-tax money in, it grows tax deferred. If you use it for qualified education expenses, you don't pay gains on or taxes on those gains. So simple. Hey, if you put $10,000 away in a 529 and it grows to $15,000, use that $15,000 for college, you don't pay the gains on the $5,000. Just so, for if anybody out there isn't exactly sure what we're talking about, that's basically how it works. So a couple things that, I agree with this article. The first thing they highlight is that you don't have to invest in your own state's plan. Correct. And there are, and again, a 529, as you said, it's the tax code.
Correct.
So it's not like every 529 is a state-run plan, right? Like you can just have Vanguard, right, and investment companies, American ones like BlackRock, like they all have their own, because it's the taxation of that money that's being invested.
Yeah, and I think they have to be, most of the plans, even like Vanguard, you're going to buy into a state's model of how they administer and manage the 529s, right? That's the biggest deal,
Yeah.
the oversight of them.
And you can have it, and really there's two ways that you can invest in them. You can do what's called a qualified tuition plan, which more or less is what is the cost of a college credit today? You buy a credit at the cost today. So if the cost of that credit goes up over time, the value of your 529 goes up.
Yep.
I kind of compare that to almost like an index. Like it ends up showing you how much interest your money is growing based on some other factor.
Well, let's poke some holes in that real
Sure.
quick. What if the cost of a tuition credit doesn't go up?
Yep. That's a big problem. Right. And I actually saw this with a client this year. He has twins. And he opened a 529 for both of them. He got a big bonus. He put like $50,000 in back in 2013. Bought the qualified tuition plan. Basically looked at it and said, yeah, well, based on this and what he was told, that when the kids get to college a few years later, hey, that 50 grand, will be worth a pretty penny. But unfortunately, 7 of the last 10 years, well, in Pennsylvania, tuition was frozen.
Yep.
Whether it was because of the pandemic, because people complain about the, hey, cost of college is too much, and states say, okay, well, we're not going to let schools raise their tuition rate. Well, then it doesn't grow. But the downside is that there's still fees with that. So this guy bought a guaranteed savings plan and actually lost money.
Because of the freeze on the tuition.
Because it didn't have any growth and there was still fees involved on the plan.
Now, let me ask the question, right? What institutions are the state able to freeze tuition on?
Well, it's the state run, like in Pennsylvania, it's your Westchester, your Shippensburg, your
So it's the PSAC schools in PA, which are owned by the state.
Correct.
Essentially.
So not your like state affiliated schools like a Penn State, Temple. But now, while great, okay, so you might be thinking, all right, well, hey, if the tuition was frozen at these schools like a Westchester, well, you wouldn't think the cost would have gone up that much from 2013 to 2022. But the freeze was only on tuition, not fees, not room and board, not books, not all the other expenses that go involved. So it's great. One thing didn't go up at all, but we're going to have our fees that don't count as tuition go up by 10%. So all of a sudden now the cost of college went up for this gentleman and his money didn't grow. He actually lost money. So again, we're going to get into pros and cons.
Yep.
Sometimes they are good. Sometimes you got to know more about it. But again, it's how the money can be, because you can also choose to have like an age-based, type portfolio. Your kids are young. You can say, oh, they're going to be in college in 2035. It's going to be aggressively invested in the market. And then as they approach 2035, it'll get more conservative. People are similar
to retirement strategies with bonds and annuities and everything else people do.
You have a goal age, and it gets more conservative, less likely to grow, but more likely to not lose, is the concept there. Now, with that, again, you can shop the different states. You don't have to buy a 529 that's in your own state, but there are potentially some state tax benefits. And every state has different laws on if you put money into a 529, like in Pennsylvania, if you put into a Pennsylvania 529, you get a small tax break on the state side, state taxes. You get a little bit of a reduction. Couple $100 a year, honestly, it's not huge. But if you were to buy an out of state, you don't get that same state tax deduction. Yeah. So that's something that's on there. Then it gets into the next piece, which
now just to clarify, right? You've got to live in the state of the plan that you're buying to get the state tax deduction. If in fact that state has a state tax deduction.
Correct. Not all states have. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but again, that's basically what this article says is hey, you don't have to live in your state to use a different state's plan. Perfect. Got it. Understood. I agree with that. Next step, because there's minimal impact on financial aid. Okay. Yeah. So,
and I want to go to they're quoting in this article, Conrath, which I don't know who Conrath is or if that's a...
Michael Conrath. He's the head of education savings for JP Morgan Asset Management.
Got it.
At least he was as of May 28th, 2021.
Got it. So a couple of things there. We're going to dig into the financial aid component because we happen to have pretty intimate knowledge of that. But the last sentence says, however, you get a better return on your investment in a 529 plan. Now, here we are, November 4th, 2022. I have at least a dozen clients who have lost money in their 529s.
20, 30% over the course of less than a year.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, false statement.
Yeah.
Period. Just, I mean, hey, when the market's up, the market's up. When the market's down, the market's down. You cannot guarantee that you get a better rate of return on your investment in a 529 plan. Yeah. I just want to lay that out there. That is fact. You cannot, there is no way to guarantee that.
So, what they get into about how this affects financial aid is what they say in this. Only 5.64% of assets or parent assets are assessed in the financial aid formula, which is true. All right. Sounds okay. I can understand where they're pointing that out.
So just to be clear, if you had $100,000 in a 529, 5.64% would be $5,640. Your eligibility for need would be reduced by that amount. Right. The 56.
Yeah. If you're, and we're going to be saying probably some things like EFC today. It is essentially schools, the government, you're going to fill out these financial aid forms and they're going to come back and say, this is how much you can afford based on how you answer questions.
Yep.
When we say that 5.64%, it increases the amount they think you can afford. Okay. Yep. But again, less than 6%. Then they say, okay, and that's after approximately $10,000 falls under the asset protection allowance. Yep. Well, even as
Where's
last year.
That bell? Can we ring that bell? Do we have the bell?
Yeah, hold on. I got it. Yeah.
The bell. It can't be the bell. It's got to be a buzzer, right?
That's
bell
not
means it's right.
The right sound. But number one, I don't know where $10,000 was not the number recently, right? Even if you were 65 years or older. Now it's zero. So I know that this is outdated, so I'll give them some leeway. But no, now you don't get anything at the first dollar. If you have $10 in a 529, it all counts against you.
Yeah, there is no longer a asset protection allowance.
So I want to just point that out on what they're saying there, right? Because even later in this article, they basically discredit their own argument here, right? They're saying there's minimal impact on financial aid, so that you should use these things. We'll get back to it. Then they say it's not just for college, right? And what they're saying here is it's used for all education expenses, tuition, room and board, fees, books. And it says you can use the money for computers, printers, internet service, grad school, trade schools, apprenticeship. And then the last piece, this was something that was changed recently. Number one, you can use 529 money up to $10,000 per a individual's lifetime from a qualified plan to pay back student loans is one thing that's the most recent change. And then a few years ago, they actually changed it that you can now use $10,000 a year for tuition for private K through 12 educations.
Yep.
Okay. So a couple things that I usually point out there that, again, the misunderstood piece, when they talk about room and board, that's pretty straightforward. But what if you're year 3 or 4 and your kid's living off campus?
Yep.
People are not aware that you can use the 529 money to pay for your rent, to pay for your utilities, to pay for food. It's just based on pretty much like what the school's room and board cost is your limit on how much you can still use as a qualified education expense. So again, I agree with this one. Yep. Yeah, it could just not be used for college. And I know we're going to get into that it can be used for a lot more other than college as well. It gets into you don't lose your money if your kids don't use it. We are also going to get into that conversation where this one ends up talking about is that you don't lose your investment, right? But the problem is that if your kids get a full ride to college or decide not to go, if you cash that money out, then you get hit with a penalty, right? 10% on the gains, and the gains are now taxable.
Yep.
So you don't lose the money you put in, your principal, like the after-tax dollars that's not subject to penalty or taxes. You've already paid taxes on that. But yeah, then when they say you don't lose your money, well, no, you do. Like that is some money that if it was saved elsewhere,
and the benefit.
Yeah. So that's basically one of those things there. They then get into it's never too late to start. The earlier you start, the more money you can save. However, even if you wait until your child's in high school, it's better than nothing. Well, tell that to the families that 2 years ago said, oh no, we got a kid going to school, and started really overfunding that 529 and said, well, we got to get growth, so we got to be aggressive. And now they've lost money.
Yep.
Yeah. No, earlier is always better, but look, there's a time and a place for 529s.
And let's just tap that for a minute, right? If you go into a 529, let's parlay it to any investment strategy, right? Mm-hmm. The general rule of thumb is your time horizon really kind of dictates your risk tolerance. And beyond that, even if your time horizon is short, mm-hmm. your risk tolerance is then only buffered by your assets, right? The amount of assets you have. Yeah. So how if you've got $1 million sitting in cash, you can take a little more risk with a $10,000, $20,000 investment than someone who has none of that, and they're using every last dollar that they have to try and invest this. So the reality of the advice given needs to be far more in depth mm-hmm. than just, hey, yeah, I mean, we've got we want to grow this money. We've got 4 years to do it. We're going to have to be super aggressive. Mm-hmm. Well, if that goes wrong, what's plan B? Right?
Loans.
Yeah. I mean, and so now instead of getting the gain tax free, you're paying interest on loans the other way. Right. Yeah. Now that's not the only solution, but again, I think the conversation is so much bigger than, hey, you take 10,000 a year and put it in here. Right. You're scraping pennies together to get to that 10,000 and you put it at risk. Mm-hmm. Another thing I just want to mention here as I'm reading through this, and this is just one article. There's millions of articles out there. We chose this one because it was relatively recent. It was a down and dirty quick overview, right?
I thought it was something that we could pick apart, agree with certain things, and pick apart others.
And it says, in reality, it will reduce, and this is going back to the minimal impact on financial aid, mm-hmm. okay? And it will reduce a student's aid package by a maximum of 5.64% of the plan's value, and that's after the approximately $10,000, which is the asset protection allowance, according to Saving for College.
Yeah.
Now, I want to be very, very particular on my word choice here. The website that gave that quote is called Saving for College. Mm-hmm. By definition, saving is without risk of loss. Investing for college is an entirely different conversation in which you are accepting risk of loss. Mm-hmm. And I think people mistake that.
Yeah.
I think every day people are because it's called a 529 savings plan, mm-hmm. right? If it's a savings plan, it doesn't think about your savings account. Do you lose money? I mean, other than inflation and monetary policy and that stuff we can talk about. But ultimately when you save, it's so that it's there, right? So I think people have to be very careful in how the words are mm-hmm. selected and used around this stuff, because one of the biggest pieces of advice that I ever give is, are you trying to invest or are you trying to save? Because there are two totally different things. Mm-hmm. If you want to invest, it's going to come with risk of loss. We got to talk about time horizon. We got to talk about risk tolerance and all those things. If you're saving, we don't have to have that conversation, right? Different conversation altogether. Okay, so how much can you save a month? Perfect. We know this times the amount of months till you have to spend it is how much you're going to have.
Yep.
Right? When you go investment, now you're talking about, okay, we got year of 12%, we got mm-hmm. year of 2%, we got negative 30%, we got 20%. Like now we got to run some simulations.
Yeah. And has to be pivoted for every year that, if it did better or worse than the simulation, right? You can't just set it and forget it.
I did a fun little calculator to share with everybody.
Okay.
Just for funsies to kind of explain that risk piece, right?
Yeah.
So college savings and withdrawal calculator. And it's a pretty good. mycalculators.com is one of my favorite websites because mm-hmm. it does a real nice job. It's the HP 80 financial calculator on a website.
Yeah.
So for finance people, it does everything you're looking for. So it says how many years until starting college. I put mm-hmm. 18. Number of years in college, I put 4, which is a misnomer.
Yep.
Because we can talk about that in a different podcast.
Closer to 6, just so people know.
Yep.
Is the average.
The average is it's like 5.8 5.8 years.
Yeah.
To get a 4-year degree. And if you don't believe it, research and tell me where you can find the 4-year mark. They don't advertise it. Everybody advertises a 6-year mark.
The graduation rate.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. How much money per year of college do you need? in today's dollar? I said, well, my kids are obviously going to Ivy League, so I got to have 80,000.
Yep.
And it asked how much I've already saved. Well, nothing, because my kid was just born. I'm planning for the 18-year shelf life. So I put $0. Average annual rate of return you can earn, I said 4%. I go ultra conservative, right? Because over any 20-year period, you can do the research. 4% is a good number, right? And then it says average annual inflation rate or annual rate of college cost inflation. Now, we can get into those statistics too, but if you go back to 2000, basically a straight line increase on a graph, you're double the price of tuition from 2000 to 2022, right? So your 40,000 a year school that was a private school is now 80,000, right? And then I said, calculate for me. And it calculates. And it says, what do you think it says, Joe?
How much you need to save per month?
Per year. I did it on an annual basis, assuming 4%. First, guess what the cost of college is going to be in 2040, based on a 7% increase. Now, I'll back off and do some more.
For 1 year?
Yeah.
$150.
$270,394.58.
Okay.
That's what it says. Now, that's assuming the 7% continues to exist, right? In order to afford that, it tells me I need to save $43,000 a year for college, which is $3,600 a month. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back and play with this one more time, and I'm going to pull back the inflationary piece of college, and I'm going to pull it back to 3% per year, and I'm going to keep my return the same. I'm going to keep my earned interest rate the same, and I'm going to view that schedule again. Now, at just a 3% increase in tuition, which we can prove mathematically that it's been 6 to 7% per year, right? It now tells me for the next 18 years, I have to be able to afford, number one, $136,000 is the cost of an $80,000 tuition in 2040. And I have to save $20,000 a year at a 4% rate of return. So you do the math. Almost $1,800
about
a month.
$1,800 a month.
Right.
And it's funny because on this article on the website was a video that stated, how much we crunched the numbers, how much do you need to save for an Ivy League education?
Yep.
It's basically what you just said. And the problem with that is it is so surface level and it is not understanding how the system works at all. So let's take that exact, the last example to use, because that's how this video worked, right? And within the article itself. So at the end of this article, and I'll tie this in, they ended up saying that if you opened a 529 with $10,000 when your kid's born, you put $500 a month for 18 years, and then you stop putting money in when your kid's born. If you got 6% return every year, I think that's a little high, but regardless.
So hold on. We can.
I got the number.
I want to fact check this math real quick.
All right. Well, so here we go.
We started at 10,000.
10,000.
We know the Ivy League education is.
Well, this is a different.
80K.
Yeah. This is a different number.
Okay.
Just at least what this was saying.
And you're saying 6% rate of return. Did they add any inflation rate or increase in the cost of college?
No. So this first one, that's what I was saying. This first one was not tied to like what the cost of college is going to be. This was just very basically saying, if you put $10,000 away, $500 a month for 18 years, you'll have $220,000 to use for college. Okay. No, we already talked about some numbers. Okay. It doesn't cover everything. But the next piece is that it says, well, if the tax advantages compared to like a different type of investment, right? If you use like a mutual fund, you got the same type of return, you're looking at $172,000 is what you would have
because
after
of the tax
taxes,
burden,
right? Yep. But in their own article, they go back and state that it doesn't hurt financial aid. So all of a sudden, if you have $220,000 18 years after your kid's born, and that's what you're disclosing to, and by the way, that's only for one kid. What if you have multiple kids and you do the same plan? Now you got to amplify this, which is
because it is a parental asset, just so everybody understands that kids are the beneficiaries.
So it's, if we both have multiple kids, right? If we have 529s and we do this plan, because I read it in an article and I do this, my one kid's born, I put 10 grand, five, and then the next one, well, I'm going to have more like $400,000 that I have to disclose in the financial aid forms. So if I got 220 grand with that 5.63%, right? It's over $12,000 a year that I eliminated my eligibility for aid.
Yep.
They're saying the tax savings is $48,000. That's why you should do it. But you're also increasing the cost of college by 49, almost 50,000. So whoa.
Something ain't end up.
Right. And then I do the video. Then what you got into was, okay, so you're going to want to go to an Ivy League school that costs 80 grand right now. It's going to end up saying, okay, oh my God, it's going to be $140,000 a year when my kids get there, if it grows at 3%. I need $600,000 for 4 years. Right. Yeah. Like, okay, well, I got to put $1,800 a month away.
Yep.
So that means that I got $600,000 that I can use for an Ivy. Great. My kids will graduate debt free. Right. Okay. But now that's 600,000 times that same 5.63%, $33,000 for an Ivy League school. If you don't understand how the system works, they basically ask you to pay what their formula says you can afford. So if you have 600 grand just for one kid, they're going to ask you to pay $33,000 more.
Yep.
Multiply that by 4 years. Great. You saved money. Your kids went to college debt free, but you paid $135,000 more for that education.
But they could afford it, Joe. So what does it matter?
Well, tell me the rich don't get richer by just not caring that they can overspend $135,000 for something.
Well, how about we take that $135,000 that you didn't have to spend and we put it in a different account and we grew it.
Yeah.
And we grew it for the next 20 years because the opportunity cost of the money we didn't have to spend now turns that money into, let's take that same 6%. Let's go over the course of 20 years. That $130,000 turns into $260 over the first 7 or 8 years, turns into arguably $500,000 of money you didn't have because you spent it because you saved it in the 529, right?
So again, it was the big piece that I took away from this is, and this video that I watched, it was basically saying like, this is how you do this. And I'm going, nobody's talking about the financial aid side. They're making it seem, and this is, I think, the biggest myth that if there's no other message that people get from the episode today is 529s are a vehicle. They are right for some. They're not right for everybody, but there's pros and cons. Okay. It is not the only way to save for college, and it is promoted like it is the only, or it's the best way to save. And everybody's situation is different. That is not a blanket statement at all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, Joe, how many like stocks do you put short positions on?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't.
Why?
Because I don't like risk.
Yeah. and beyond that, do you have a really good feel for what stocks you would short?
No, I don't. It's not my area of expertise.
And
Dave.
if you were to want to short stocks, would you seek someone out who could tell you? Would you research the heck out of it? Would you get into that in order to take that move?
If I was actually going to put some real money into it, I would probably pay a professional.
So I look at it and go, we're people, but that's the other misnomer here is like, these people are paying a professional to put money into a 529, right? And I want to make very clear, we are not poo-pooing the 529.
Again, time and place.
What we're saying is people are doing this because it is the common knowledge, right? We talk about killing sacred cows. As a matter of fact, the book on that shelf right there says Killing Sacred Cows. It's about some of the financial misconceptions that people have just because it's been so widely spread. You know, it's one of the cool things that has been happening recently as families come in to talk to us is the buzz is out there. The people are hearing that they're not all that in a bag of chips, right? And should we do it? Shouldn't we do it? How much should we put it? So people are starting to question it. I think the intent of the 529 is right. I think the actual, if you play it well and you use it strategically for your family, maybe couple generations, you can have a massive benefit of the 529. But I think blindly, the middle America for, under 250,000 in adjusted gross income, even up to 350,000 adjusted gross income, just blindly dumping money into a 529 without the understanding of the outcomes.
Right.
I think is a very real problem. And the shame of it in my eyes is that you have a kid, you're coming out of that hospital, you're like, oh, I got to do everything I can for you. So I got to start saving for your college. And so you start down a pathway 18 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. Assuming you have a kid today. And you had no idea of the outcome of the pathway you were starting down. And I know for a fact that good planning requires knowledge of the desired outcome.
Yeah.
So that you can work in reverse to generate what you need to for that outcome. Right. That's, I don't care if you're saying financial planning. I don't care if you're saying business planning. I don't care if you're saying family planning. Like,
yeah. And I think that's ultimately when people ask me, are 529s good or bad? It's not that the vehicle itself is good or bad. It's how people end up, use them, because like you said, the desired outcome is what often gets missed when you have people and, they got a senior in high school and they got a 529 and there's $30,000 in it. And they know that college is going to be more than $30,000 for 4 years. The problem becomes, well, how long ago did you do this? We did it 18 years ago. It's like, okay, you put $50 a month away. It's like, well, when you did that, did you?
Oh, that's let me run that calculator.
Like, did you have a plan on what? And almost always the reason why, like, the 529 ultimately fails, it's not the vehicle. It's that it was just, if you want to save for college, put your money here. How much can you afford a month? Yeah. Just put it there. But there's not what is that actually going to get you? Do you have a shortfall? Are you overfunding you have to know what pathway you would be on so that you can know if what you're going to hopefully accomplish. And it's like the blind trust of just saying, I got to save for college. Everybody uses a 529. I'm going to do that. How much should I put in? I won't buy a case of beer this month. I'll put $50 in and I'll just do that.
Or we were spending on diapers. They're potty trained now. So we'll use the diaper money. Right?
And then you say, I was paying $2,000 a month on daycare. I'll now switch it over to the 529. Well, are you putting too much in? Like, again, there's so many things that you have to know that desired outcome. But if you use the desired outcome, like the calculations you ran, like this video, and saying, okay, Ivy League school is going to cost this. And now you live on cat food for 18 years. So you can put $2,000 a month. And then all of a sudden it ends up costing you more. Right. Or then what if your kid doesn't go to Ivy League after saving all that?
Yep.
What if they get a full ride to a smaller private? They're good enough to go to Ivy Leagues, but there's a smaller private school that
thanks to the cat's meow.
Yep. And now you're sitting on $600,000 in a 529 that you just sacrificed 18 years of your own life and struggled, right, to make ends meet, to not go into debt and to make sure you keep funding this thing. And now, so you have to know, the only way to know what the best vehicles or how much to put into different vehicles is you got to know what the plan is. What are you trying to, and it's just the blind, I got to put money away for college, so I'll just do it. But not knowing what's going to happen, that's where these things end up failing.
And we give presentations all over the place, all over the country, virtual, live, in different venues on kind of the college planning aspect of life. And I use a statement when I'm discussing 529s, and it's a single slide. I say, listen, 529s, are they the best thing since sliced bread? Are they the worst thing? They're good, they're bad, depends on you, depends on your family, depends on how many people are going to be paying for college, depends on your income level, depends on your student's performance in high school, blah, 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 right? Bottom line is if you have a 529, you should get it. And then I'll continue and say, biggest problem with most 529s is that people start them, they put them on a regular drip where they're dripping money into them, they're dollar cost averaging into some investment strategy. Perfect, right? I like dollar cost averaging. I like buying at all different points. But it's usually $100 or $50 a paycheck or $150 a month, something like that, right? And they set that number and they forget that number, and it's that false sense of security that I'm saving for college. We're going to be able to knock this thing out. I've been saving for 15 years. It's going to be awesome. Well, just to run a true investment calculator for everybody, if you had a present value of $5,000, so your kid's born, you take $5,000, you drop it in a 529. You have 18 years to save. You make 6% rate of return and you put $50 a month into it, the end amount of money you will have is $34,051.49. That's assuming you get the 6% and there's no down markets, and then the down market doesn't come at them inopportune time when they're about to go. So now You have $34,000 that you've saved up over a lifetime of work, and your child's about to go to college, and they choose, pick your school. I don't care. Pick any school you want. Pick it. Pick the cheapest school in the country. You can afford half of a year.
Right.
Maybe if you go, and we talked about the PSEC schools earlier, their sticker price is about $28,000, right? Yeah. You got $28,000. You can pay for a year for one kid.
Right.
How many kids do you have? How much has the other one's grown? Did the investment do the same when you started it at, in 2000 versus starting it in 2004? I can show you statistically that is an impossibility, that the investment did better or worse. It just is 100% different, right? You talk about the ups minus the downs, and there you go. So I think it's the false sense of security that the 529 creates for middle America that's the problem.
Yeah. And it, unfortunately, it's that killing sacred cow piece, because when I teach clients this, they end up realizing, which is also what we talk about, it's not just 529s, it's retirement too, right? So again, when you end up getting into,
let's talk about the timing of it too, because that's important.
You got timing of, okay, I'm going to pay for college, and then I'm probably retiring not too long after, right? We call it the perfect storm. You got college and retirements right then and there. But people do the same thing with retirement, where they just blankly, I put money into a 401k. Okay, well, how much do you put in? I don't know, some percentage of my salary. Okay, well, do you get a company match? I think they match something. Okay, well, how much is that going to grow to?
Well, my calculator on my account says that I'm in good shape. I'm on track.
It looks like sunshine, not cloudy. On my professional investment calculator. But it's kind of that. It's the same concept, right? It's just the blind. Well, what if you are? It says like, you're not in great shape for retirement, and you're too worried about that, and you're trying to balance how you pay for college. You're trying to balance to make sure you pay for retirement. And you're just doing this stuff blindly without knowing that desired outcome.
Also colliding with your highest income earning years, right?
Yeah. And so now it's like, well, how do you know if you're putting enough in retirement? How do you know if you're putting too much in retirement? How do you know if you're putting too much away for college or not enough? Like, these things have to be cohesively together, because they'll both fail.
Yep.
Right? You have to succeed at both.
If you don't believe that college and retirement are one and the same problem, you're missing a huge point. And I had a conversation yesterday with a client who is working with us to try and help get their students in the right school, make sure they got good solutions and a strategy moving forward. And they were like, we don't know if we want to do it. We don't know if we want to move forward, or, we'll just go it on our own. Their kids are in private school. The school's really been helpful in the admissions process and blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, well, let me ask you a question. You've got your oldest of three. They have I think it was a senior, a sophomore, and a sixth grader. And I said, how old is your sixth grader going to be how old are you going to be when your sixth grader graduates from college? And he was like, did the math, carry the one. He's 48 now, going to be 60, 61 years old. Well, there's something interesting that occurs in your 60s that I've found a pretty common occurrence in this day and age is, we used to be able to sail off into the sunset, right? We had pensions. We had all kinds of things that it almost encouraged us to retire.
Yeah.
We don't have that anymore, but we do have this wonderful world of voluntary separation packages, downsizing, job altering. Your payroll is high. This person can do that job for half the payroll, elevating up. So I think the key to remember for everybody is that the timing of this whole thing plays out into your, right? The idea is you get past college, you really eyeball retirement, you're starting to slip into it. If you make mistakes in college, it's going to affect your retirement because you're only a couple years away.
Right.
Ideally. And most of America right now, at least the people I'm talking to, they don't want to work till 65 and 68. They want to work till 58 and 60, right? In some cases 62, so the Social Security and all that, right? But the idea that what you're thinking today is going to be the same you're thinking when you're, tiptoeing into retirement. And then there's this one last little piece. You don't always get to choose your retirement, right? I have 20 or 30 families we've worked with where
Yep.
Mom, dad aged up and got walked out and couldn't get another job. And, everything kind of just had to get fast forwarded.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the perfect world, you plan perfectly for college, you plan perfectly for retirement, you choose the date, you walk off into the sunset, you've got the golden parachute, you're ready to rock and roll. That's just not reality for a lot of families, right?
Yeah.
And so, I often get the question, Joe, like, why do I focus so much on college planning? And I mean, if the last 20 minutes doesn't explain why college planning is so vastly important to the long-term goals of the parents, it just has a lasting effect on everything you do if you do it poorly. Now, let's go to the flip side for a second, because I want to talk about the student.
Yeah.
One of the other reasons that I find what we do to be so important is that every parent spends 18 years driving their kids from point A to point B, telling them to get good grades, working with them, getting them tutoring, getting them extra help, paying attention to their grades, working on the admissions process and all that. And all we want is a successful launch.
Yeah.
It's pretty widely known now that there's a student debt problem in this country. But I think there's a misconception on the debt problem that it is all the students' debt.
Right.
It's not all the students' debt.
Yep.
It's between the students and the parents and the private institutions versus the federal government versus the plus loans versus you can $1.7 trillion
is not all student government. Yeah.
And what happens when there's a large debt burden? It delays the launch. It delays the home purchase. It delays the moving out. It delays the marriages. It just delays things.
It delays them being able to save for their own kids.
Yep.
College education.
So we have this massive generational trickle down effect that we're not paying attention to.
Right.
So that's why I think college planning is so important.
And again, because of what has happened over the past so many years with the cost of college increasing. I mean, there's a great Wall Street Journal article out there, talks about, parents that are over 60.
Yeah. And paying student debt.
And they've realized that they're never going to be able to retire, but it's not from their own debt. It's from what they borrowed for their kids, for their kids' education. And that is, it's scary. Yeah. And we've done episodes on the plus loans and how they can garnish Social Security payments. And it's real. And if you, and again, in a previous, I'll say, lifetime prior to becoming a college planning specialist and just being a financial advisor and having training and managers tell you a couple things like, hey, you can borrow for college. You can borrow for college. You can't borrow for retirement. So tell your clients to put their money in retirement. That is, I've realized now, is so wrong, right?
It's not saying you can't do that. You most certainly can do that.
But you got to be able to. You better be able to pay it back.
And
it's not a solution, right?
Correct.
That's not a solution. So I go back to that, and it's just. I mean, it's really scary when you ultimately think about it. But then it just comes down to how do you do what's best? There is no cookie cutter approach. Like you said at the beginning of this, we're not going to have answers for you as a listener.
Yeah, this is not an answer session. If you want an answer, you got to get one-on-one advice.
You have to understand that
from somebody who knows.
This is so complex.
Yep.
And right now, the very surface level type of planning that is done is exactly what that video showed and what you did. What does college cost today? What will it cost in 18 years? How much do I have to put away? Right? People see that number and they go, okay, well, I guess you're going to go to a state school. So how much do I have to save for that?
Yep.
And when you're unaware of how the system works and how financial aid works and how an Ivy League level institution can actually be less than an in-state state school if you play the game the right way. This planning it's wrong because you end up putting more money away for college. You pay more for college. Now there's less money that could have been there for retirement. One affects the other so much. And it's not just when you're in college, it's the years 10, 15 years before college.
And the 5 or 8 years after college.
And that's where I look at it and say, why I'm so passionate and why I love doing what I'm doing is because the cookie cutter approach it puts families' financial future at detriment.
Yep.
And that is what's scary, that you can go online.
By institutions that call themselves fiduciaries and all these other things.
Right.
So what does that term even mean?
Hey, put $4,000 a month into a 529 and it'll solve all your problems. No, it won't. It can make things a lot worse. So that's where
you got to be strategic and tactical. So I want to go back and tie something together.
Why are they often misunderstood, Dave? Even outside of what we already talked about.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Now you've opened
down
up
the rabbit hole.
Pandora's box here, right?
Yeah.
So let me just explain a couple of things. The IRS tax code, it's subsection 529 that we're talking about, right? But that comes from a substantially larger code, which is the U.S. basically government code, right? That has all laws, rules, everything. And we did an episode last week that was on the debate in Pennsylvania for the Senate seat, and basically just poo-pooed the responses of both of them because it was clear that they had no idea how the system actually worked. I've studied this for 15 years, and I just pulled up today to get back into it. I pulled up the U.S. Code Title 26, Subtitle A, Chapter 1, Subchapter F, Part 8, Subsection 529. And the reason that I think it's critically important that there's professional guidance in this stuff is because this code is not clear. It's not. It's like every other tax code and everything else. You've got to dip into different sections. You've got to dip into different titles, subchapters, and it's all kind of convoluted. The point that I'm making there is that even the people making the laws don't understand what actually goes on. And so you're talking about, left, right, center. I don't care. The student loan forgiveness, the way that whole program is set up doesn't handle the $1.7 trillion program. And not that it's going to go through it all, but it doesn't handle it. The senators that are going to make law and negotiate and litigate don't know what's actually going on. And the only thing that families hear are the loudest voice out there or the most present voice in their lives on this stuff. And ultimately, you have to be your own custodian. You've got to take some ownership in this and really dig in what's best, right? I've had different families where grandparents are well off and they started in a 529. The family came in. We're looking at 529, well-funded 529 for the kid. Great. The downside of that is different than the downside of having it in the first generation. But we talked about it. I invited their parents in. We talked with the grandparents, and we came up with a different plan, right? And the idea was, okay, we've got 529s with enough money in them, right? Well, let's figure out a different way to transfer the wealth. Let's figure out a different way for the grandparents to do it. And so I really do enjoy the estate planning side of 529s, which I think is probably one of the best strategies you can use, but it doesn't solve the problem of the family that needs to afford college. Right. It's for the upper echelon that have the excess money, or even for middle America when they get there, when they get to the end, right? And they're actually trying to do strategic planning for estate planning to avoid taxation. I think there are a lot of use cases for 529s in that regard. But to the same extent, how much do you want to overfund? How much can you overfund? So the point that I'll make as concisely as humanly possible is who has your best interest at heart in this whole thing? And if you believe what you read, you believe what you see in the news, you believe everything that comes off the internet, there's a gullibility factor to that. And you cannot be gullible when it comes to your money. You have to put yourself through some type of education or find somebody that makes sense of the gobbledygook for you. That's the challenge I put out to everybody. I've met with financial advisors all across the country that have no idea how the system actually works, but have portfolios with several $1 million of 529 monies in them from a variety of families, right? So, we talk about killing sacred cows. We talk about being custodians, and I think it's stewardship. I think there's this big thing going on right now, which is the financial fiduciary, which is a fantastic concept. but an impossibility, in my opinion, to actually achieve across the board.
Yeah.
It has to be a singular case in that moment of financial, being a fiduciary. And the fiduciary is giving advice that is in the best interest of the client, not the interest of the advisor or whoever's doing it. Well, by general nature, if you make money in the financial industry, there's a
benefit to you.
Yeah.
The more money that you take from someone, the more that you invest for someone.
Whatever it is,
there is some type of
money moves. Somebody's making money, right? So there's a conflict of interest inherent in that. Well, I use a builder. I'm very capable of building things, right? I use a builder who is not the cheapest, but is excellent. Yeah. And I know that when I contract him to do a job, that job's done the right way. Every time, if they make a mistake, they come back to it.
Shortcuts are taken,
and I pay for that.
Yeah.
And so the big question, or the big kind of like thing to advise people here, is obviously go find somebody who knows what they're talking about. You want to talk to us? Come talk to us. EliteCollegiatePlanning.com, right? But at the end of the day, make sure that whoever you're talking to is not selling you, but educating you.
Right.
Period.
Yeah. Yeah. And my big takeaway, I mean, look, when I got professionally designated as a certified college planner, and I realized that for 5-6 years of my career, oh my God, what I was doing was causing people to pay more for college, right? That's immediately when it was next day, I said, okay, nobody's doing this, and everybody's teaching the wrong thing. Like, I wanted to get out and like get on a pedestal and preach to the world, like, everyone, guys, and not necessarily for my benefit, but just because it should be known.
Yep.
And so, like, I look at this and say, hey, if you want to sell a 529, like, I almost think that there should be, outside of just a fiduciary, like, no, not that it has to be a certified college planner, but you should have to pass a test to know what that does to financial aid, to make sure that that is the best actual pathway and vehicle to use for that family.
Yep. Because
when you do it blindly and you say, oh, well, that's what my manager told me to do, use a 529 and save for college, you're doing it wrong. Like, you're causing families to.
I think that's a great
crazy.
Point. Well, how did the 529 wildfire spread? Word of mouth, right? Well, this parent talks to this parent. I just did this. My parents did this. And then all of a sudden, and so we're taking, in the financial industry, it's illegal to give financial advice without the certification to give financial advice, right? But we take financial advice from like our neighbor who's who knows, they could be a builder, a garbage man. But so it's again, that's the part of that sacred cow, which just understand how it affects your family, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You start, hey, this one family learned that there was a 5-year provision with the 529. Their kid was born and they just received an inheritance. They go, oh, we can use this for college. We're going to put $150,000 in, and they never put another dime in. And all of a sudden, 10 years later, they go, yeah, we got college covered, and there's $200,000 of gains we don't have to pay taxes on. And someone goes, what's that? Oh, great. I'll put my $20 a month in that investment.
Yeah. Now, again, just to reiterate that example, a lump sum at child's birth of $100,000 given 18 years to grow, compound, you'd be talking about taking that 100 and turning it into $400,000.
Right.
And then you got $300,000 of tax-free gains to fund that. That's a different scenario and a very good use case.
Right. And I've seen it. And that is also the same kind of case. There is the last thing that you would probably ever think is a phenomenal estate planning tool is a 529.
Yeah.
But you take that same concept where you have money that passes down, right? It's out of an estate. It essentially passes down.
Key comment he made is that it stays outside of the estate.
Yeah. So it avoids estate taxes, right?
It avoids being included in the estate. Right. So it's just a separate kind of line item. And that that custodian also changes.
Right.
And that goes with it.
So now all of a sudden you just mentioned, hey, if you have 18 years to grow, well, the powerful piece that when we talk about like, hey, the wealthier people, right, that they're trying to avoid the big, hey, you have an estate that's very large and you're trying to avoid some potential taxes to Uncle Sam. You work hard for your money, keep it, pass it down to family, generational wealth. Well, what if you pass it down to your kid with the intention that it goes down to your grandkids and your great-grandkids? You're not talking about 18 years. You're talking 20, 40, 60 years of growth that now there's potential ways where you can basically, I didn't just save for my one grandkid.
Yeah.
Right. I save for my family tree.
For generations,
the branches of generations. It's almost like a generational family scholarship that can be done. But again, when you talk about being misunderstood, when I've put in front of families and said, look, yeah, you want to do this from an estate plan. This is what you want to, this is what you do. You're going to put this into a 529. I'm like, what? Yeah. Uncle Sam gets less money. Colleges, hey, they're going to get paid when it comes, but guess what? It's not going to come out of your kids. Your kids, grandkids, great grandkids are not going to be graduating with student loan. And that's one of those pieces everybody thinks is just
as disclaimer. Don't just go
right. Please
do that. Get advice on it.
Please don't take any of this and say, I now know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And this is not us giving financial advice. This is us discussing the subject matter of 529s and their use cases. Right.
And honestly, again, as with any other vehicle, there's the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yep.
Right. And knowing your specific situation, what we talked about, that roadmap, the end game, right, is where you determine, okay, is a 529, is it what I'm trying to accomplish? Does that give me more ugly and I shouldn't use it? Or, hey, based on my situation, based on what I want to have happen, based where I want to go, it might be the best vehicle that's out there. Yeah. Right. And I say they have their time, just like every other investment. Time
don't get me wrong. I love avoiding taxes.
Yeah.
Especially when the government allows you to do it.
Right. But your focus can't be 100%
correct
on avoiding taxes.
Correct.
You have to have this, we call it the three-legged stool. And money grows, pay the least amount in taxes as possible, but also get as much financial aid for college as you can, because that's how you win at this game for college and retirement.
Yep. All right. We got pretty deep.
Yeah.
We didn't go all the way on 529s.
Yeah, we could spend another 2 hours on this.
But again, guys, I hope you learned something. Our objective is to kind of talk about the subject of higher education, whether it be interviewing high-ranking officials at universities and colleges and the financial aid departments in the different chairs of the different schools, or discussing subject matters that are real, like the 529. So hope you enjoyed it. We'll talk to you next week. This has been College Knowledge.
Thanks for listening to the College Knowledge Podcast with your hosts, Dave Kozak and Joe Kerins. We hope you enjoyed this week's exploration of higher education, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. To suggest a topic or recommend a guest, please visit collegeknowledge.net. If you like the content, please subscribe on your preferred podcast listening app. Share or post about it on social media. That's all for this episode. See you next time.